Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so it's June, time to rank some champions and we are going to be starting with ranking all the 2023 champions released thus far. And obviously keep in mind that these are the freshest champions in the game, so therefore, there will be a lot of changes with them over time because in many cases takes time for the champions to fully kind of like come into their own, for more people to acquire them, for more people to realize the benefits and disadvantages of having them. And as always, whenever you're ranking the latest champions that have arrived in the game, those rankings are the least accurate and they change over time the most, which is also why the following videos are going to be the 2022 champions ranked. And we're going to compare how I ranked them initially. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And so on and so forth. And now the mandatory disclaimer. I am not going to be trying to offend your family's honor. I am not going to try and provoke anybody. We are all different players, have different preferences, and we value different things. Every champion that is released these days is going to be somebody's favorite, and there are going to be hardcore defenders. And I have champions that I absolutely love using, and I think a lot of people are either underestimating or not, fully realizing the potential in them. But that's just quite that. There is a difference in between, having a favorable opinion of a champion and the champion actually being, better or worse than others. A lot of these things are subjective, and that's why I am going to be trying to balance my personal subjective opinion of champions with their track record thus far, how many people are hyped for that champion, how frequently we see those champions in Alliance War, how frequently we see those champions in Battlegrounds, and whether we realistically can expect to see those champions maintain their popularity in future. Because with this game, as with everything else, there's always that new car smell effect where a new champion gets released, they get a lot of attention. Many of these champions quickly get forgotten about. Some don't, and some raise in popularity a year or two after release. All that being said, obviously keep in mind that this is my opinion mixed with current game relevance and trends. And that said, let's jump to Auntmay's website and start ranking the 10 champions that we have in game so far that have been released in 2023. And the first thing that we need to note is that there are no bad champions. Every single champion released this year so far is good, decent, They have their uses, they have their purpose, they have their fights where they will do exceptionally. We're not talking about, years like even 2019 when, looking back, there's obviously champions that have been significantly more successful and significantly less successful. Like now Mr. Sinisters or Ebony Maw upon original release. Like nobody's really playing Cull or doing anything with it. Or, Ronan is hardly the most popular champion. And even last year, we had some champions that, just not that good. Like we have Captain Britain, and a couple others that, just don't really do much. But obviously, as the time goes, BAM is getting more consistent. Last year, there's like one or two champions that are, below average, I would call. But then the previous years, we can definitely find some more. And the further back we go, there are more and more champions that are just lacking. With 2023 champions, I don't think any champions particularly lacking. I think every single one of them is at the very least good and useful. And therefore, it is going to be very controversial to put somebody at the bottom of this list. And that's kind of the problem. I'm gonna put Champion X as, intense spot, and I'm immediately gonna get people at my case. No, that should be high. And I get it, because all of these champions are good. But you can't give, trophies to everybody. Somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And I think spot number 10 at the moment for me is kind of a bit of a safety pick, and it's going to be Sandman. And it's not because I necessarily think Sandman is going to be the worst champion, but it's more to the fact that Sandman, well, not many people do have him to begin with. He didn't benefit from the increased arena cutoffs and stuff like that. He's not in the current featured crystal. There are very, very few people around with 6-star ranked Sandman. And then on top of that, we just haven't seen much of him. And that's the truth. But of all the champions discussing we are going to be discussing here, when it comes to Sandman, it's kind of hardest to evaluate him. Don't see much of him. There are obviously some things that I am worried about in terms of his design. You know, he's kind of like ramp up heavy spamming champion, which often does not bode too well. At the same time, there are some things that I absolutely love about the guy. His immunities. Has 3 immunities, which is awesome. And he has access to petrifies and to de-accelerate debuffs and a whole bunch of nice kits of utility, which I think is awesome. That is my favorite part. Science is my favorite class. But at the moment, I am putting Sandman in spot number 10, primarily because he is one of the more recent champions, and we just have not seen him do anything really. Has had zero impact on the game in realistic sense, and it is partially because he's very new and very few people have him. But typically, if the champion is like really useful and amazing, you see that champion, as rare as it is, being featured, being showcased more. I do hope for Sandman to, you know, uh, prove himself in the future, but so far he hasn't. So I'm putting Sandman in spot number 10. Spot number 9 is where it gets harder. In spot number 9, I'm gonna go Shocker. I think currently Shocker is just not doing that great. I have seen a few people with rank 5 Shockers that swear by him, but at large, when people open, let's say, all the featured 6-star crystals, Shocker is not at the top of anybody's rank list, you know? When you pull these champions, people rush to rank up Future Ant-Man, people rush to rank up Kate Bishop, maybe a handful of other champions. Shocker is kind of taking a back seat. And it kind of has to do with Shocker being also quite one-dimensional as a character, with, yeah, a few defensive tricks, but realistically, I don't think anybody's going to be looking at Shocker as quote-unquote dual purpose or a defender type of champion as well. And then on top of it, he has extremely one-dimensional source of damage, which is basically that massive heavy attack, which requires setup. And even though Shocker was apparently designed with Battlegrounds in mind, I am not sure that Kabam did the best job they could with him. And on top of it all, Shocker suffered one of the most disingenuous pre-release campaigns that Kabam has done. Because in the footage that was showcased in the deep dives, he had significantly higher damage output that he has in the game currently. It was about 40, 35% higher damage in most of the clips than you can achieve right now. And I do think that that is what would make the difference. You see, if he is designed to be Valorant's focused champion, quote unquote, nuke, then speed is almost everything. And with Shocker, you do virtually non existent damage until you drop that heavy attack. And the amount of prep that is required for you to drop that heavy attack means successful or unsuccessful champion. If he was a champion where you could reliably and comfortably use, let's say, rank 4 Shocker against a relatively good rank 4 defender, drop that one level 1, drop level 2, and finish the fight, we would see him much more often. Currently, with Kabam's, adjusted and changed damage numbers, he's not quite there. He's at a point where you more than likely need to drop the 2 level 1s. Yes, you save a bar of power, but it still takes time to do all of that, and then charging your heavy attack takes time, and end result, he's just not that fast. So, I think we have one of those examples where just because something is designed with something in mind, it does not guarantee it's going to be successful. At the same time, it's still early, and Shocker is still subject to champion balancing. And at end of the month, we will hear about Shocker, whether he's getting a tune-up or not. I kind of suspect him to do so, to be honest. And also, obviously, it all depends on the upcoming metas, upcoming champion releases, which kind of abilities we are going to be looking for. There are still quite a lot of variables, but out of all the champions that we are going to be discussing here, I think Shocker has not left the best impression, in my personal opinion. And again, I know that there will be people who love the guy. Again, given the choice in between other champions and like this year's crystals, Shocker just doesn't really get that call up for those catalysts. That said, let's move on to spot number 8. And spot number 8, I am going to be giving to Will Vision. And Will Vision is yet another champion that I personally actually really like. I do think she's very cool. And we have started to see a bit more of Will Vision. And she is subject to balancing. And I really do hope that Kabam adjusts her slightly and improves her reach a little bit. As we can see, she is, without exaggeration, she has overall the worst stats in game. If you're taking HP, crit rate, crit damage, block proficiency, everything else together, she does have the worst stats in game. She's at like the bottom 10 or 20 champions in virtually all of those categories, which is quite rare. And there are obviously design reasons why Kabam thinks, they can get away with it and Viv can still be effective. That's largely with her phase mechanic. But that just means that, if something does go wrong, she goes down fast. And then on top of it, obviously, she does have like a cycle. She isn't hitting particularly hard until you drop your level 2. Then you make sure that you have all the solar energy, and then you start shooting specials. And that can be troublesome as well. Overall, I do think that with Will Vision, as long as you rank her to rank appropriate level, she has more to offer than Shocker has in terms of access to, passive heal block, very frequent phase mechanic, ability to gain openings that way. She has her immunities. Unfortunately, just like Shocker, she isn't particularly Liquid Courage double edge friendly because she does require special spam. So even though she does have the immunities, can't benefit from them to the fullest. But overall, I would put Blue Vision slightly above Shocker, personally. Again, it's very early for these champions. Things might change, but I see Blue Vision having more potential use in the game, in more different scenarios. The problem with Blue Vision, obviously, also is going to be, though, that in longer form content, she just is not it. Kind of similar to Corvus. But similar thing can be said about Shocker, because Shocker really isn't all that impressive in longer fights either. Both of these champions are designed for like a very specific health pool range, how their rotations kind of like deal with that. So I would kind of tie them up there, but overall, due to immunities and more utility, I would put Will Vision slightly above Shocker. Moving on, another champion that is very new, and I'll fully admit I am not the most experienced player, but however, I have seen more of Moondragon than I have seen the previous 3 champions being present in competitive game modes and across the game. And Moondragon, I think, is going to eventually fall in that category of a solid, good skill champion. Do I think she is going to shoot to the top of the skill class like Valkyrie or somebody has? No. Do I think she's going to, be completely forgotten and unusable? Also, no. I look at Moondragon at the moment similarly as I do to somebody like Black Widow Deadly Origins. High damage, skill champion that, has some bits of utility. Um, Objectively, Moondragon has more utility. I'm not entirely sure which one of the ladies has more damage. But again, very new champion, but she definitely seems better than I initially thought she would be. And she's putting in work. So who knows? Maybe she's going to end up climbing even higher. These purify abilities and the fact that you can um, gain your psionic charges very quickly and then pretty much maintain your psionic transcendence, thus being able to prevent evade, putting plenty of debuffs on opponent, and dropping those energy vulnerabilities and having a nice chunky level 2. There's quite a lot to like about Champion. On a personal level, I do regret not grinding for her in Arena, especially considering the level of cutoffs. Wish I did, and yeah, she's definitely better than I initially thought she would be. And again, time will tell exactly where she lands in the skill class and in the game overall. But I do think that she has displayed more potential than champions that we discussed previously. And she has done it in shorter amount of time because she's a newer champion. So that's also quite important. Then moving up for Moondragon, I'm just going to be putting in Baron Zemo. And this is where I will know that a lot of people are going to be coming after me. And in reality, I just don't think Zemo is all that. I think there are some matchups where Zemo goes crazy. And I love champions like that. I love the fact that there are these interactions. I always am up for a good cheese, but in like average generic matchup, just not that good. And then the changes that Kabam are making to him due to balancing are going to reduce my interest in, well, already have reduced my interest in the character even further by swapping that armor up buff to armor up passive. They are eliminating dozens of amazing potential interactions for Baron Zemo against many different opponents. And he otherwise would have much, much more favorable interaction with stuff like, buffet nodes or power snack nodes or some nullification champions and stuff like that. But passives kind of ignore all that, and you will not be able to access most of his quote unquote cheese matches. And then he's going to be relatively bare bones. And I don't think he's bad. I just don't think he's nowhere near as good as people made him out to be. I think a lot of his initial popularity stemmed from very enthusiastic, YouTube community about him because of the cheese matchups. I think a lot of his popularity stemmed from the fact that he was top 5 prestige champion and many people were going to rank him up anyways. So, might as well pretend that he's amazing. And that's kind of it. And obviously the fact that he's a bit peculiar to fight, but with a bit of practice, he really isn't all that troublesome on defense either. So this is like one of those champions where initial reception was somewhere here, and I think it's gradually falling behind. And with Kabam tuning him down, I'm personally significantly less interested in this champion. Every single champion above him in this list so far, I believe, is just objectively better or more exciting. Anyways, that's not to say he's not a good champion. As I said in the beginning, I think every champion released this year is very good. They just are. And that said, I know people who love their Baron Zemos. Don't think he's as good as some people made him out to be. Moving on, and this is a tricky pick. Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock was arguably the most hyped champion before his release, and now that he has released, that hype has kind of died down because, as it turns out, it's not that easy to play him, and that's my impression as well. Because I did grind for him in Arena, and I did get him, and I did take him to rank 4 Sig 200, and I'm still learning. I'm by no means like super confident with him. I think one tiny change, would make him miles better than he is, and that is to change his taunt to passive infuriate, and then we would have like an insane champion. On paper, everything that you would want from a cosmic top tier champion is here. He has access to a ton of immunities. Immunities also to like nullify and obviously incinerates and cold snaps and stuff like that. Access to unblockable furies, precisions, stuns, regen. That is a lot, and he is awesome. When the fight goes well, he is amazing. Feels very great to use as well. He has, solid attack. Everything is more or less fine with his stats. His HP is on the smaller side though. He is quite squishy. But that safety pod thing kind of, helps him quite a bit to mitigate any damage incoming and so forth. The problem with Animal Warlock is that it also seems quite AI dependent, and you do need to put in time and practice and effort using him. I hope, going forward, he makes it. I hope going forward he becomes a mainstay in my offensive champions because I do find him very exciting champion. On a personal level, I love questing with him, but I often screw up and I get hit in the face, but that's part of the practice. But even after all this time, it is much tougher to get him working properly and reliably than it is most other champions released recently. And that is due to his aggressive playstyle, you having to make split-second decisions. And it feels kind of similar to Kitty Pride in a sense, where you need to be aggressive, you need Lento's intercept, but you also need to remain calm and make the right decision at the right moments. But yes, that said, there is definitely a ton of potential with this guy, and whether it is going to be present in every game mode or not as much remains to be seen. But at the moment, I am definitely putting him above the champions that we discussed before. And now, top four. And I think top four is very, very interchangeable. I think all of these four champions deserve to be up top by far. And at fourth spot at the moment, I'm putting Cassie Lang. And Cassie is just very, very solid science champion that has been added with almost all of the correct stuff. There's just one thing that she's kind of missing, in my opinion, that would be like a petrify somewhere on her final hit of heavy attack. Not a big one, just a small one, just to have it. But all that said, obviously, Power Sting champion that's immune to buffs, also immune to poison, and immune to shock. Those immunities come in play quite often. She has moderate defensive value. I wouldn't call her a good ward defender, but she's solid enough battlegrounds defender. She does have access to guaranteed crits as well. She synergizes extremely well with Ant-Man Relic. And overall, she is one of the champions this year, released this year, that's making an impact on game already in wars, in battlegrounds, in questing. She's part of a relatively limited global champions that are completely buff immune, and that alone, given the rest of her kit holds up, gives her a lot of advantages in many different scenarios. And yeah, we just need to make sure Kabam fixes her whiffing issues and the rest of the stuff. And I think Cassie will be one of those science champions that does get used for foreseeable future. I really do. She's a very, very solid addition to the game and has already managed to make her way to, most competitive players rosters and in frequently used category for those people. Now, top three. In the third spot, I'm going to be putting in Kate Bishop. I think Kate Bishop's awesome, and this is one of those times I just have to hand it to DLL. Both of the champions that we have had the chance to play with, that he has designed thus far, second one being Absorbing Man, are very awesome. I like Kate a lot, and the craziest and coolest thing is 95% of the people using Kate use like a very minimal aspect of her kit. And the reason that attracts people to Kate is that passive cold snap and a very high amount of damage. Then there are obviously incidental things that are very helpful. The fact that she doesn't gain any buffs on her own, that she has AI manipulation with basically kind of like passive taunt ability. But there is plenty of things that we still haven't kind of utilized from Kate, starting with the fact that she can bypass miss. because she has tracking debuff on her heavy attacks that you can relatively easily maintain. Might not be the best miss counter for like high speed scenarios, but it's super reliable. Or her arrows. We really largely rely on the cold snap arrows um, over her ability to shut down opponent inflicting debuffs on you very quickly and easily. So uh, again, it does slow her down, but in like questing scenarios and challenge mode scenarios, I think this is gonna come tremendously, handy. And obviously, alternate means of damaging champions is much more than most champions have in game. Even though obviously Caltrops might not necessarily be as potent as Cold Snap is, but if you compare it to a ton of other champions, where if opponent is bleed immune, then I know Black Panther does nothing. But having access to alternate source of damage if you are faced with immunity is also super important. And yeah, I think Kate's amazing. He's fast. He's reliable. He is, with some practice, easy enough to play. And he has all the makings of a very, very successful champion, in my opinion. So I am putting her in third spot. The reason why big reason why Future Ant-Man and Absorbing Man are above Kate is because I just think they kind of have more, and they also have, some defensive power, and there's just more application to perhaps some of the more simple things that these champions. In case of Future Ant-Man, obviously he has, just like Cassie Lang, been bugged since release, so we actually have never had a chance to play with Future Ant-Man with his intended level of power. But even as is, um, there is just so much to love about this guy, and he is an absolute monster. His damage is up there, definitely. Power control is up there. Utility bits are up there. So the coolest thing about him is that he can tune down any massive burst of damage that you would take to 10% and then regenerate basically 5% of that, which in combination with his glancing and everything else is going to make him, and already does make him, an insane tank. And Future Ant-Man, yeah, we already see him as a mainstay in Alliance Wars. I have used him in Alliance War offense already. We see him as a mainstay in Battlegrounds. We see him as a mainstay in questing. He has a relatively easy to execute playstyle that does offer you fair amount of variability. Love the fact that you can kind of pick and choose which special attacks you can use. That is something brand new, and it's extremely helpful. And I think, at the moment, Future Ant-Man is the second best champion released this year so far. And I don't think there will be too many people that disagree with me on this one, because the man is putting in work both offensively, defensively, across all the game modes. And then the final is Absorbing Man. Absorbing Man is the best champion released this year. I think that much is clear. He has defensive power, he has plenty of offensive power, and most importantly, he has a million ways to express his pieces of utility because they come in very generous numbers. There is obviously skill requirement to use him at his best in kind of like some of his trickier matchups, but once you kind of get used to it, it isn't as hard to pull off. And ultimately, I think he has had tremendously good impact on the game in terms of player skill level. Before Absorbing Man came out, many of the people who now are relatively comfortable with light intercept would never even attempt it. And I love champions like that increase the overall bar for the summoners, like Ghost did, like Absorbing Man does, and a few others like Tigra, where if you want to use that champion to the fullest, you will be learning, and it's worth to learn. And Absorbing Man definitely is worth it. Obviously, him as a champion does have his downsides as a Mystic champion. He doesn't really have any buff control on him at all whatsoever, and also his tremendous pieces of utility often are kind of conditional and selective, where you can counter this one thing at a time. And there are plenty of times when your like immunities do not line up with the type of damage that you wish to protect yourself. He does have below average health pool, even though he does have access to a sizable region. But overall, yeah, Absorbing Man, without a doubt, has integrated himself at the top of MCOC, and he's there to stay. Being used in every single game mode. He is being used by all of the most competitive players. He answers a variety of problems and will continue to do, largely because of the generic nature of his utility. Because his real utilities pretty much lie in the fact that you have massive resistance is making you one of the tankiest champions in the game against that particular damage type, and his immunities. The fact that you can switch from energy to basic hits also is extremely helpful. And that's it. So it's very kind of like loose conceptual kits of utility. Energy or basic hits. These immunities or those immunities. This resistance or that resistance. As I said, it obviously has its downsides when things don't line up. For instance, you might need shock immunity, but you would want energy resistance. I don't know, fighting somebody like Dr. Doom. But you can't have it all at all times. So there are still potentially trouble brewing. But at large, just a very good champion. And yeah, I also don't think he's busted beyond the belief or anything like that. He's just well designed, very potent, good champion. That said, that is my top 10 thus far. Number 1, Absorbing Man. Number 2, Future Ant-Man. Number 3, Kate Bishop. Number 4, Cassie Lang. Number 5, Adam Warlock. Number 6, Baron Zemo. Number 7, Moondragon. Number 8, Will Vision. Number 9, Shocker. Number 10, Sandman. Thus far. As always, this is a mixture of my personal opinions with current game relevance and trends, on top of the fact that this is still very early days for almost all of these champions, and these rankings will almost definitely change by end of the year. That said, let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with, and I will catch you guys tomorrow when we reevaluate 2022 champions. See you later. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about